2020 is the 200th anniversary of Anne Brontë's birth, and before the year closes, I'd like to talk about the Anne Brontë manuscript in special collections. This is part of the Brontë family manuscript notebook, which in turn is part of our collection of manuscripts and books by and about the Brontës and their circle. It's one of the earliest collected parts of the Brotherton collection. Much of the Brontë material focuses on letters and manuscripts of Branwell Brontë, but Anne is also represented in this notebook, which was acquired by the Brotherton Library in the late 1950s and has been fully digitised for us to see today. It's a small, quite shabby notebook. It wasn't intended for posterity, but it is a remarkable object. As you look at the notebook, you can see that it has been used in different ways throughout its history. The first use appears to be the 11 pages of an incomplete manuscript by Anne Brontë, which is a dialogue on the truth of the Bible. And the book was later, rather thriftily reused, you can see that it's been flipped and reversed, by A.B. Nichols to transcribe the poems of his wife, Charlotte Brontë. This was quite an important resource for early researchers into her work because he gave dates that the poems were written. After these first uses, we can see a later purpose of the notebook through the faint notes in pencil on the inside front cover and first few pages. And these were made long after the notebook was originally created, around the time of its sale at Sotheby's in the 1950s. You can see there are some later amendments in different hands. Now, the notes themselves attempt to describe and perhaps fix the significance of the object that they're written on. These notes originally misidentified the manuscript draft as being by Charlotte Brontë, although a later amendment in a different hand corrects this. They describe the significance of the poems written out by Arthur Bell Nichols. Now, this is not something that a cataloguer would dream of doing today, but it shows the regard with which this notebook has been held over decades. It's an episode in the life of the object itself. Now, even just seeing the digitised images, we get a really strong sense of the book's first uses at Haworth. It's really interesting to try and compare the different handwriting styles in the same volume as well. Think about what they might tell us about the authors. Anne Bronte's hand is carefully neat. It's a governess's hand. A.B. Nichols' hand, while still very legible, is maybe allowed more freedom of style. Perhaps he did not have to write for others to read. So I want to take a closer look at the Anne Brontë manuscript in Special Collections Holdings, part of the Brontë Notebook. It's an unfinished draft and it's about 11 pages long. You can see that there's a false start and the manuscript trails off as the ink runs out on her pen. We've previously described the manuscript as a discussion of the truth of the Bible between two characters, but it's actually worth examining this a bit more closely. The text is indeed a discussion between two speakers about Christian faith and the truth of the Bible. One is a skeptic and the other a believer who justifies their belief in the Bible in rationalist and scientific terms, that science does not disprove faith. Much of the justification that she uses comes directly from Humphrey Davy's book, Consolations in Travel, or The Last Days of a Philosopher. Davy, who had died in 1829, was an incredibly popular scientific figure, a celebrated chemist and inventor who had written this book towards the end of his life. And it's a compendium of poetry and thoughts on science, the natural world, and spirituality as well. The book was hugely popular and was widely read for several decades after its publication. Now you can see the importance of this book to Anne Brontë elsewhere in her work. It appears in The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, for example. And now this is an anachronism that has actually long puzzled readers. The Last Days was published outside the very specific time frame of The Tenant. Now, the fact that both the manuscript and the tenant refer to the same work actually also helps us date the manuscript, we can presume that it was written around 1847, the same time as the tenant of Wildfell Hall. Now, this manuscript, alongside the mention of the book, show Bronte's identification with Davy's philosophy and themes that occur throughout her work, where reading and study are at the heart of spiritual development, and science and faith go hand in hand.